The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Sunday, April 6th. I am in Israel, as the title suggests. And I figured today we do, it's late here, so like yesterday, it is 10 p.m. At night. I figure we do a short show today. Just covering some more stuff on the trade, on other things going on in the world and in the United States. Maybe a quick update on things happening here in Israel. Just to give you a quick update, somebody's asking if I'm hearing any bombs. I am not, and that's because I'm in the north of Israel. There was some missile, it seems like. I don't know exactly what's happening, but just earlier, a little earlier, just as I was leaving my parents' home, there were some air raid sirens down south. It looks like in Gaza they launched some missiles. I'm pretty sure those missiles have been knocked out of the air, but nowhere near where I am, so not to worry. I will be leaving Israel tomorrow. I will be heading back home. It'll take 2 legs to get there. I'll be flying into Madrid, spending one night in Madrid, and then flying home the day after that. What else? In terms of logistics, there won't be a show tomorrow. There won't be a show on Tuesday. There'll be a show on Wednesday, and we'll get into some kind of schedule after that. Although there's a lot of travel between now and the end of May. All right. Well, let's talk. We'll talk today about a little bit more about tariffs. I want to give you a little bit of an update, and there was an excellent op-ed today in the Wall Street Journal. Today, or was it yesterday? When was this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal? I see it now, April 4th. So on Friday, it was a very good op-ed on the Wall Street Journal. I want to read a little bit from it. It kind of bolsters everything I've been arguing about some of these issues. And then we'll talk about different countries going to negotiate with Trump over tariffs. We'll talk about a lawsuit over tariffs, over the authority of the president to do tariffs. 1 second. We'll talk about the authority of the president to actually even impose these tariffs, and there's a lawsuit challenging that, and then we'll see what else we cover. Of course, the show will be determined by the questions you guys ask. So this could be a very short show. It could be a very long show. Hopefully not a very long show, but it could be a long show. And you can send questions in the super chat, and I will answer them. Anything you ask, I will answer. So feel free to do that. All right. Let's see. Where do we want to start? I'm in Israel, so just give you a quick update in Israel. Israel is, there's still significant fighting going on in Gaza, or at least Israel still is slowly advancing within Gaza, bombing in Gaza, putting a lot of pressure, trying to put pressure on Hamas. The idea is that if Israel puts pressure on Hamas, then Hamas will come to the negotiating table around hostages. The mood in Israel, the atmosphere in Israel is such that the focus is almost exclusively on bringing the hostages home. There's very little talk on victory. There's very little talk on defeating Hamas. There's very little talk about what happens next if and when Hamas is defeated. Almost all the discussion everywhere, and almost everybody expresses the same view, and that is that the number one priority of the nation is to bring back the hostages. I think this is an indication of a couple. Not one. It has obviously inflicted significant harm to its enemies, particularly Hamas and Hezbollah, and to some extent Iran, but it has not won. And I think whereas in the first few days, first few weeks after October 7th, there was this atmosphere in Israel of, we're going to crush them, we're going to thrash them, we're going to defeat them, we're going for victory. I think that's gone. I think the attitude right now is, it's just cut the best deal we can. Victory over Hamas is probably impossible. Look what we did, look what we tried, it didn't work. And by the way, I consider this a massive failure of leadership by Netanyahu and his government, an inability to win the war and do what is necessary to win the war. It's also leadership of communication, of inspiration, of keeping the Israeli public focused on what is important, which is the destruction of Hamas. Now, it's hard to do over a year and a half when everybody knows you could have defeated them in 3 weeks. But so Israel's given up, in a sense. It's given up the idea of victory. And then the question is, well, what do we achieve? And the Israeli public right now, a significant proportion of it at least, seems to believe that the only thing that really can be achieved is the freeing of the hostages, and the way to do that is to cut a deal. And they are quite happy, well, maybe happy is an exaggeration, they're quite willing to cut a deal with Hamas, negotiating with terrorists, fine. They don't seem to really care. I mean, they may be negotiating with terrorists for, what is it now, 32 years since 1993 in Oslo. It's only led to more bloodshed, it's only led to more destruction, it's only led to more harm. But you know, Israel really, this is what happens every time Israel engages in a war. It seems to be going well. Everybody supports the war. Then it bogs down. Victory is not achieved. The public turns against the war, and it seeks other alternatives. And that's what we're seeing here. This is the cost of not engaging in a ruthless, brutal war that would have won it all for Israel, defeated Hamas, achieved the victory in the first few days, weeks, certainly months after October 7th. Now, the memory of October 7th is dimming. The focus is exclusively on the suffering, and the suffering is horrific, of the hostages and their families. It's you know, the hostages, by the way, the constant reports of the amount of torturing the hostages enduring, the brutality of the Hamas captives, the isolation, the darkness, the starvation, just horrific conditions under which they're being held. And it's now a year and a half. These people were torn from their beds, dragged from a music festival. You know, some of them were raped and beaten and tortured even before they were taken hostages. Then they were taken hostage. Many of them were injured and received very, mediocre or poor medical care. Anyway, that is what's on Israeli minds. How do we free them? And they're willing to give up anything, almost. And the Israeli public is clearly blaming the Netanyahu government for the hostages not being released. You know, they're not really blaming Hamas. And the sad reality is, as I said, they've basically given up on the idea of victory. They've given up on the idea of completely defeating Hamas and crushing them. There's also a lot of scandals going on. I'm not going to get into all of them. Some of them I don't even know. I don't really understand. I haven't really dug into. A lot of scandals that are problems for the Netanyahu government, that the Netanyahu government is accused of. And of course, one of the biggest issues is, one of the biggest issues is that they are being that the Netanyahu government has not really started the process of any kind of independent investigation of what happened on October 7th and why it was caused. They don't want such an investigation because such an investigation clearly would indicate that the Netanyahu government, over years and years and years and years of neglect and wrong evaluation of the situation, basically is responsible for what happened on October 7th. But beyond that, there is now something called Qatar Gate. And this has multiple dimensions, and again, I haven't gone into all the details of this, but multiple dimensions, whereby the Netanyahu administration is accused of facilitating the transfer of billions of dollars from the Qatari government to Hamas. I think this is all true. They have identified a particular businessman who facilitated the transfers from Doha to Gaza. And he is quite friendly with Netanyahu himself, is often a dinner guest at the Netanyahu home, and he's the one who got all that money from Qatar to Gaza, money that ultimately was used to build the tunnels, to buy the weapons, to build the entire military infrastructure that not only cost 1,200 Israeli lives on October 7th, but also cost now 500 lives of soldiers who have been fighting in Gaza for the last year and a half. But beyond that, it seems that there are members of, close to Netanyahu, people in Netanyahu's office, in the office of the Prime Minister, who have been on the Qatari payroll, that are basically, if you will, lobbyists for Qatar. And it is truly horrific. Qatar is an enemy nation. It is an enemy nation of Israel. It is a country that has facilitated terrorism all across the world. It is an enemy nation of the United States. And the United States has chosen to bury its head in the sand. The United States has chosen to pretend that Qatar is not its enemy. The largest American military base in the Middle East, after all, is in Qatar. And America can get away with it to some extent. Israel cannot. Israel treating Qatar as a friend or treating Qatar as neutral is life or death. For Israel to treat Qatar the way that it does made October 7th possible. And that, of course, is the responsibility of this government. And so there is a Qatar gate going on. A couple of people from Netanyahu office have been arrested, in a sense, as foreign agents. But this is a big issue for this government, and it's going to be interesting to see how Netanyahu survives. Now, Netanyahu, the one skill he has, the one ability that he has above all others, is to survive politically. He will grind it out and somehow survive. But this Israeli government is corrupt. This Israeli government needs to acknowledge its responsibility for what happened on October 7th, the fact that it allowed the Hamas under its nose, really, to arm itself, to prepare itself, to train, and to build the tunnels, and to build up defenses, and to do everything that it did, that it allowed for that, right? That it allowed for that. It let it happen. The fact that they allowed Iranian, Qatari money to flow into the Gaza, the fact that in spite of the many attacks from Gaza against Israeli citizens, Israel dithered and waited and refused to destroy Hamas and achieve victory, which it could have done 2 years earlier, and it had to wait for a disastrous event like October 7th to finally wake Israel up and actually do a little bit of what is necessary. But the fact is, it hasn't done what's necessary. It hasn't defeated the Palestinians. It hasn't defeated Hamas. It hasn't achieved victory. And the consequence of that is prolonged war and prolonged uncertainty. And indeed, if it's true that missiles were fired out of Gaza tonight, then they haven't even destroyed all the missile launching capabilities of Hamas. You have to say that this government has failed, that Netanyahu as a leader has failed. Failed completely, failed thoroughly in the one assignment that they had, which is the one assignment that any government has, which is the protection of the individual rights, the protection of the lives of its own citizens. So that is a little bit of what's going on in Israel. Of course, there's a lot more going on in Israel. It's a country that is... Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, and that'll lead us to the discussion of tariffs as well. Well, two things. One is a new political party was formed today in Israel under the leadership of Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett is somebody that I would much rather prefer see as Prime Minister of Israel than Netanyahu. I can't say I'm a fan of Naftali Bennett, but Naftali Bennett is certainly, of the people in the political arena in Israel right now, based on my granted limited knowledge, is, I think, the most qualified and the best to deal with the current situation. So it's going to be interesting to watch this new political party, how it evolves, who does it take votes from. Right now, a poll done today would make it the largest political party in Israel, but only by an inch, by one seat bigger than Netanyahu's Likud. But of course, we're not going to have elections for a couple of years, although with the scandals going on right now, we might have elections sooner. But, between now and elections, anything could change. It's impossible to say what will actually be the outcome. Netanyahu, because of all the scandals around him, he's already also facing corruption charges. He's in court. He's regularly testifying in court in his own corruption case. And Netanyahu took a vacation this week. He chose as his location of vacation Hungary. I think he chose that for two reasons. One is Hungary, in spite of the fact that Hungary until yesterday was a member of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, Orbán has said he would not hand over Netanyahu to the court. So it was a safe place for Netanyahu to go because he knew that he wouldn't be arrested. You remember that members of the ICC are under now obligation as members of the ICC to hand over Netanyahu to the criminal court, to arrest him basically and hand him over to the criminal court. And indeed the criminal court demanded that Hungary arrest Netanyahu and hand him over. Hungary refused and then withdrew from membership in the ICC, which is a good thing. The second reason I think Netanyahu went to Hungary is that I think he has some affinity to Orbán. I think he, like Trump, who all have an authoritarian nature, admire the ability of Orbán under the guise of democracy to basically become a almost dictator, but certainly authoritarian leader of the country. Orbán faces very little opposition from the media because he has the media under control. He is basically taking control of all the kind of levers of power. There's no checks and balances. There is no real checks on his power anymore in Hungary. So I think they all admire him. I think every leader aspiring to be authoritarian admires Putin, but they can't go to Russia. So the proxy for Putin is Orbán in Hungary. Anyway, today Netanyahu surprisingly announced that he is flying to Washington, D.C. to meet with Trump. He will meet with Trump tomorrow. He is the first world leader to meet with Trump post-tariffs. And supposedly on the agenda for them is one, hostages. I don't know that they'll talk much about that. Two, Iran. I think Trump will update Netanyahu on his efforts to negotiate a deal with Iran. And three, and I think ultimately most importantly, and why Netanyahu is actually going, is tariffs. Tariffs. That is, Netanyahu is going to Trump to argue the case that Israel actually has zero tariffs vis-a-vis the United States, does not tariff American goods, and therefore that Israel was treated badly by Trump's announcement on Wednesday that Israel would face 17% tariffs in spite of the fact that Israel doesn't tariff American goods. The U.S. is going to argue that that the United States runs a trade deficit vis-a-vis Israel. And that is true because of Israel's huge advantages with regard to high tech, and as a consequence, there is a trade deficit with Israel. And the fact that Israel has a VAT, although VAT is irrelevant to tariffs, but that is not going to stop Trump, ignoramus Trump, from using that as a argument against Israel. Anyway, it'll be interesting to negotiate. Supposedly there are 50 countries now that are waiting in line to come and kiss the ring or to kiss the ass of the President of the United States in order to try to get some weakening of the tariff regime. At the same time, you have, so Netanyahu is there primarily for that, I think, although the other issues will play out. He, I think, is trying to get on Trump's, stay on Trump's good side and emphasize and try to grovel and as much as he can, and basically present himself to Trump as his best friend. Now, partially because Netanyahu knows that Trump next week could change his mind and become very anti-Israeli, very anti-Israel. All right, so that is Netanyahu going to Trump. So let's talk more about the tariffs. So, as I said yesterday, China has imposed 34% tariffs on all U.S. goods. The EU is putting together a significant package of tariffs on the United States. So are many other countries. This is going to be a full-blown tariff war. Ludwig, the Commerce Secretary, came out today on television saying that the tariffs would not be delayed. That is, that Trump and the Trump administration is fully committed to imposing these tariffs this week, and that they're convinced that these are supposedly good for America. Now, he's lying. I don't think anybody's convinced they're good for America. Maybe Trump is because he's ignorant, but I think anybody who knows anything knows that these tariffs are a disaster for America and for its economy. And certainly the stock market is sending any indication possible to people that that is the case. All right. I think I need to lower the volume, guys. Let's see. Anyway, this is only going to get worse, not better. And Ludwig is the tariff guy of this administration, is really pushing for this. And it's an unmitigated disaster. There's no question about that. This excuse that everybody gives about why we need a global reset, this idea of the hollowing of the middle class, this idea of how awful the last 50 years were, and how everybody's taking advantage of us, and how Americans are suffering as a consequence of globalization. Well, there was a good op-ed on Friday in the Wall Street Journal. I highly recommend you read it. It's interesting. It was written by Norbert Michel. Norbert was an economist who worked for Heritage Foundation. But then as Heritage Foundation shifted to become MAGA and shifted to become anti-trade and anti-free markets, Norbert left Heritage and moved over to Cato, which remains a free market institution, at least when it comes to economics. Anyway, Norbert is very good. I encourage you to follow him. Anyway, just some facts, right, about the last 40 years, and I'm reading from this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. middle class has thrived over the past 40 years. In fact, Americans of all economic backgrounds have done well. The share of household earning more than $100,000 a year has tripled over the past 5 decades. This is all in real dollars. And the share earning less than 25% fell by 25%. This is what I told you yesterday, that the middle class has gotten smaller because more Americans have gotten rich, categorized as rich. And indeed, the middle class has shrunk, but so has the poor section of the United States. So if earning less than $35,000 a year is poverty, that's shrunk by 25%. I continue. For most of this period, workers in the bottom 10% of income distribution experienced stronger wage growth than those with higher incomes. The middle class has shrunk only in the sense that former middle income earners have moved up the income ladder. Materially, Americans are much better off than they were in 1970. Over the past 40 years, 70% of working age Americans spent at least 1 year among the top 20% of income earners. Notice, 70% of working age Americans spent at least 1 year among the top 20% of income earners. And 80% never spent more than 2 consecutive years in the bottom 10%. So, I mean, this is all statistical and demagogy, statistical lying and demagogy. These people who claim that America is in such awful economic shape. Now, this is not to deny that we could be doing a lot better. But the problem is not globalization. Indeed, globalization is what has helped us be as successful as we are to date. Globalization is an overwhelming economic positive for America. Global trade has been an overwhelmingly positive phenomena for America, for Americans. He continues, the popular story of the death of U.S. manufacturing is nonsense. Mr. Vance and his cohort maintained that increased free trade with countries such as China in 2000 or Mexico in 1994 killed American jobs. Well, let me just say, I'll say, there's no such thing as an American job. There's your job and my job. But anyway, it's true that the number of manufacturing jobs is lower than it was in 1970. But that's because we make so much more with fewer people. Blame technology, not trade. Real hourly output per manufacturing employee has been on an upward trend since 1959. Real U.S. manufacturing value added, the sector's contribution to gross domestic product, reached its highest recorded level in 2022. Not 1970, 2022. Manufacturing output was close to its all-time high in 2022, and the U.S. remained the global leader in manufacturing value added per worker. In other words, China might manufacture more, but it adds less value. Workers contribute very little because they're not very productive. So they produce massive volumes, but their labor productivity is very low. That's why wages in China are low. In the US, we might produce less than China. We're still the number 2 producer in the world. Manufacture less than China, still the number 2 manufacturer in the world. But our labor, because it's so productive, every hour of labor adds enormous value to the products being made. Here's an example. Steel is one example. In 1980, this is a stunning statistic, by the way. In 1980, one steel worker could produce 0.083 tons of steel in 1 hour. 0.083 tons of steel in 1 hour. By 2018, one steel worker could produce 1.67 tons in an hour. That's what, 20 times? So a steel worker today, or at least in 2018, was 20 times more productive than a steel worker in 1980. We're not talking about 1880. We're talking about 1980. 20 times more productive. That's stunning. This, I continue to quote, this is a good thing. Wage and income data in the United States show the rising tide is lifting all boats, especially the smallest. He continues, American manufacturers now operate more efficiently, use fewer natural resources, require less backbreaking labor, produce less pollution, employ more highly educated people than ever. No tariff or trade restriction is going to reverse these trends, and the US shouldn't try to do so. Populists may want to bring back the factory towns of the 1950s, but most Americans are too busy enjoying the prosperity of the 2020s. So I'm not the only one out there. This is a pretty well understood phenomenon. All right. What is going on? All right, some good news. All right. That's that. All right, here we go. No, that's not it. Anyway, I saw this earlier. Where did I put it? Okay, it's disappeared on me. There is a lawsuit now. There's a lawsuit now filed against the Trump tariffs, claiming that his declaration of emergency powers is unconstitutional. And this would be great if the Supreme Court took this up. The reality is that we have dozens of emergencies having been declared by presidents over the last 40 years. Dozens. And all kinds of rights-limiting executive orders that have been the consequences of these emergency declarations. So it would be amazing if the Supreme Court was actually willing to take up, some of these emergency power questions and really issue a ruling that clarifies when it's appropriate to declare an emergency and when it is not. There is no emergency right now in the United States that would justify, actually there's no emergency ever that would justify, but there's no emergency right now that could even remotely justify Trump's tariffs, which basically represents a seizure of power by the executive from the legislature. Congress can pass a law that raises taxes. Congress can pass a law to raise or impose tariffs. The president cannot do it unilaterally. Now, Congress has defaulted in its responsibilities and given the president emergency power to impose tariffs in times of emergencies. But there is no emergency. So there is a chance that the courts will save us from Trump's tariffs. It's pretty shaky grounds that Trump is trying to justify this. So now we've got, these lawsuits. Trump is attempting to bypass Congress by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But in its 50-year history, no previous president had used it to impose tariffs. And it's just, there's nothing in the law that would suggest that it's an appropriate use of it. Now, the IEEPA mentions things like embargoes and sanctions, and is being used against hostile powers like Russia and North Korea and Iran. But here tariffs are being used against our friends. It's not a hostile nation. Now, to some extent, Trump is trying to show that the tariffs are related to, or at least the Canadian and Mexican tariffs are related to immigration and drugs, which he perceives as a security threat. But then how do you explain tariffs on Europe and other places? This is going to be really interesting. To what extent is the court willing to protect the role of the legislature in determining what tariffs are? And to what extent will they allow for Congress to just shrug and renege on its responsibility and approve of the ability of the president to just declare any kind of emergency they want in order to pass whatever tariffs they want. I mean, what Trump is doing with these executive orders and with these tariffs is a complete negation of the whole idea of checks and balances that the Constitution articulates. And it would be amazing if a conservative court, dominated by justices that were selected by Trump, actually votes down these tariffs as unconstitutional. That would be amazing. By the way, for those of you interested more in the whole tariff issue and the whole manufacturing and bring the jobs back issue, highly recommended essay called Buy American is Un-American. Buy American is Un-American by Harry Binswanger, who wrote the essay in the late 1990s. And as relevant as ever. So check it out. You can find it on aynrand.org. Just search, put in quotation mark, Buy American is Un-American, and you'll find it. Excellent essay. Unbelievably relevant to what is going on right now. All right, let's see. Yeah, so this entity that is suing is the New Civil Liberties Alliance. I have not heard of them. Let's click on this. Let's find out who the New Civil is. They help protect civil liberties from the administrative state. That sounds fantastic. And here's their press release. Today we filed the first lawsuit challenging President Trump's new tariffs on all China imports. He imposed it under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law that lets presidents freeze assets or block transactions during real national emergencies. It does not let them rewrite U.S. tariff law. Congress has exclusive constitutional power to set tariffs. It already did so through detailed statutes. The president can't sidestep that by invoking vague emergency authority that says nothing about tariffs. Our client, Simplified, is a small Florida business owned by Emily Lee. She sells premium planners and home products that empower women. Her company imports goods from China that aren't available here, and she's already paid steep tariffs. The new Trump tariffs would drive her costs through the roof and force her to raise prices or cut back. Okay, so they are suing this. They write about the law. The law doesn't give president, okay, so here's what they say. Here's the bottom line. No president has ever used IEEPA this way, not even Trump in his first term. This tariff violates the Constitution's separation of powers. The major questions doctrine and the non-delegation doctrine make clear no executive can seize legislative authority to impose economic policies of, quote, vast political economic significance, unquote, without a clear, explicit directive from Congress. The law doesn't give the president this power. The Constitution doesn't allow it, and the court shouldn't tolerate it. We are asking the court to vacate the tariff and block its enforcement, because if presidents can start taxing Americans by emergency order, the Constitution's limits on power don't mean much at all. I agree completely. So I support this lawsuit 100%. I think they're absolutely right. I very much hope that judges block these tariffs and they block it sooner rather than later. I hope this goes to the Supreme Court. I hope the Supreme Court does a good job of basically criticizing and maybe vacating all these emergency power acts and institutions of presidents and all the rights violations that they have involved over many, many, many years. So some people are standing up against this. Yeah. Okay, final point I'll make, I made this yesterday, but it's worth making again. To a large extent, the tariffs are power play. To a large extent, the tariffs are a way for Trump to flex his muscles. They're a way for him to gain attention. They're a way for him to force global leaders and corporate leaders to come and grovel before him. They're a way to get them to kiss his ring, to realize who's got real power in the world. And they give him that thrill of making everybody in the world dependent on him. He is the center of attention. He is the man that everybody's going to fly to see. He is the man that they're going to take out to dinner for a check for $5 million. This is the most crony, swamp-friendly economic policy ever. It's truly a disaster. All right, we'll call that the news for Sunday, April 6th. Again, I'll be back to a more systematic presentation of the news starting on Wednesday. But this will have to do for today. Now, we've got some questions, but we're way off our target. So our target is $250. We've got about $150 to go. So please consider supporting the show with a sticker, with a question. Questions are great because I get to answer them. If anybody out there we don't have a single $20 question, which is very unusual. So those of you so inclined, it would be great if you jumped in with $20, $50, $100, $500 questions. Get us past that goal. Don't let the goal be not reached. We've got the first hour goal of $250 and the second hour goal of $500. Also, a reminder to you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com, and just put the Yaron Brook Show, and you can become a monthly supporter of the show. All right, let's jump into this. Nefel, thank you for the sticker. We've got a number of stickers here, actually. Barbara, thank you for the sticker. And I think Sylvanas, was it Sylvanas who did a sticker here? Sylvanas, yes, Sylvanas a sticker, and Jonathan Honing a sticker. So thank you, Colt Savage. Thank you guys for the stickers. Really, really appreciate it. Barbara, another one. No, not another one. Same one. Okay, thank you guys. I very much appreciate it. But we need a lot more. So come on over. Value for value. A trade. It's late at night here in Israel. All right. So yeah, we're probably going to make this short and equal to reality. Says, nice, made it live on time for once. Good job. Yeah, these days, given I'm doing it from Israel, it's a much better time for anybody in the UK, like equal to reality. Icy Saracen, what's your view on reports about Israeli killing Palestinian children? Is it true or not? I don't know what report you're talking about, but do Palestinian children die during this war? Sure, the collateral damage to the fact that Israel is fighting to defend itself, and in a war, children die. It's the one population that is mostly innocent. Also, there is one question: is what constitutes a child? Hamas trains Palestinian children starting at age 14. Is a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, are they children? Do they count as children? But are Palestinian children dying in Gaza? Yeah, probably. Probably in lesser numbers than are reported, but they're probably dying because the terrorists, the Hamas, are hiding among civilian population, and the only way to fight them is by taking the fight to the civilian populations, and the civilians are going to die. Who is morally responsible for their death? The moral responsibility for the death of every Palestinian child is on Hamas. It's on those who initiate force, not on those who pull the trigger. Those who pull the trigger are fighting in self-defense. The cause, the reason they're fighting is the initiation of force by Hamas and other Palestinian militants. Okay, also Icy Saracens. There was a video of an Israeli hostage kissing his Hamas captor. Is it fake or is it genuine? It's probably genuine, but it's probably done under duress. These hostages don't love the Hamas captors. They're not enthusiastic about it. They've been treated horrifically, not horribly, horrifically. They were dragged from their homes. They were kidnapped. They're not kissing the Hamas hostages because they like them. They may be kissing the Hamas hostages because somebody put a gun to their head and said, you better kiss the thing because we're going to put it on TV. I think it's pretty disgusting to assume anything otherwise. But yes, so it might be true, it might be real, but it is a consequence of coercion by Hamas. No hostage loves his captor and enjoyed his captivity. Stephen Katz, what do you think of the odds of becoming an actuary after being a lawyer? What kind of things can I do to have a chance? I mean, I don't see any reason why not. You would have to study actuarial science. You would have to, study for it. I don't see why you couldn't go and get a degree in actuarial science. That's the step you would have to take. Actuarial science is not easy. It requires deep mathematical skills, real mathematical skills, and it's complicated. I don't think you can go just from lawyer to actuary. I think you would have to get a degree. And there are universities that specialize in actuarial science, and that's where I would go. All right. I.C. Saracen. You say these hostages are being starved or tortured, but there are videos of them saying they're being kept. They're being well kept. Some saying they were protected. A lot of them say that because they're trying to protect the hostages that are still left over. But as somebody who knows people who know the hostages firsthand, the stories that they tell, not to the media, but in person, the stories that they tell are stories of horror, horrific conditions. The stories and we know this because of the forensic evidence on the ground, of being kept alone in the dark, of being beaten, of being provided very little food, of being provided very little, if minimal, medical treatment, of being, some of the hostages are being murdered in cold blood. Many of them have been beaten to the point where they died. The B-bus babies, we're talking babies, 6 months. I can't remember what the exact ages were. They were killed. They were murdered in cold blood. Their mother murdered in cold blood. We don't know what else was done to her, but one can only imagine. I don't know, given the videos that Hamas filmed on October 7th, the barbaric, animalistic behavior that they engaged in, the raping, the torturing, the burning, why would you even think that they would treat their hostages well? These are barbarians. They've proven themselves to be barbarians, and they have prided themselves on their barbarity. They videotaped this. They put it up on social media. They relished it. Dragging girls through the streets, dragging the bodies of women through the streets. I mean, these are not actions of civilized human beings. So why would you make any positive assumptions about anything that they do? And finally, they're taking hostages. They're taking people from their homes and they are imprisoning them against their will. Why would you assume they treat them well under those conditions? I find it bewildering that you would even make that assumption. Of course, it's not true. I just watched video today of one of the hostages describing how horrible the treatment was that she was under while she was a hostage, one of the released hostages. There are dozens of these videos. You have to, maybe you're watching some propaganda channels of Hamas, pro-Hamas sympathizers, who are picking and choosing a few exceptions of hostages that were maybe treated decently, versus the many, many, many videos of hostages that are being treated awfully, plus the first-hand testimony that the people who've actually talked to hostages that are being released have talked about it. Yeah, Jennifer says this icy guy is dishonest. There's something going on there. I mean, clearly his questions. All right. Michael, how does Trump think destroying everyone's stock portfolio is supposed to help his legacy? Narcissists care about legacy, nihilists don't. I think he's talked himself into believing that there will be a turnaround. He's talked himself into believing that the long-term consequences of this are all going to be positive, that it's going to bring manufacturing back home, that there's going to be this golden age, and this is the temporary and short term. I think he's talked himself into that, and I think they will keep making arguments, suggesting that this is the case. But, I really do think that he's at a point where what he really cares about is getting back at the people he believes have hurt him, including Wall Street. And I think that his nihilistic tendencies are now stronger maybe than his narcissistic ones. But, he can be a nihilist and then rationalize his narcissism. He's rationalized that he will have a legacy by assuming that something good will come of this, or that by doing this he is destroying his enemies and destroying the enemies of America, and therefore there will be positive consequences by eliminating the enemies of America. It's very difficult to analyze an irrational, completely irrational mind. It's not like people are pure narcissism, pure nihilism, and pure pragmatism, and pure mafioso. People are a mishmash of a lot of different things. On any given day, one of those might motivate them. Again, irrationality is inconsistency. It's inconsistent by its very nature. Frederick. I missed yesterday's show, but I want to second yesterday's On the Leroy's message. YBS withdrawal is real. I'm glad you're safe and the Wi-Fi hasn't caused trouble so far. Thank you, Frederick. And unfortunately, the next 2 months are going to be spotty when it comes to Yaron Brook shows. Now, not that there won't be a lot. There'll be a lot, but they won't be as consistent as they have been in the last few months. And they won't be as consistent as afterwards because of the travel. So that is the reality. Neo, Yoav Gallant's latest interview highlights actions Israel could have taken, but Bibi refused. A must watch for insights and discussion. Yeah, I recommend it. I think Gallant was generally a force for the good within the Netanyahu government, particularly in the first days after October 7th. Again, I have said this for years. Netanyahu is a coward, a procrastinator, a power-lusting, narcissist who has done more harm than good for Israel and should have been kicked out as prime minister immediately after October 7th. I think somebody like Gallant could have done just as good a job. Indeed, I think he could have done a much better job than Netanyahu. I'm more anti-Netanyahu today than I've ever been in the past. Stephen, this actuary had no actuarial experience, has few tech skills, but I passed the first 2 tests a long time ago. Does that change your answer? I don't know. I'm not an expert on the actuarial field. I don't know what it's going to take. You passed the tests a long time ago. I don't know if it's worth retaking them. It might be, or if it's worth brushing up on the content. But I think it's going to be challenging to be hired unless you can convince the employers that your skill set is fresh. That it's current and it's fresh. You being a lawyer, how will they know you'll know how to do the job? Thank you, Stephen. I hope this is helpful. I'm not sure it is. IC Saracen, you are making it sound like it's Qatar, not Iran, that is the threat to Israel. No, Qatar's not a threat to Israel directly. Qatar just has a lot of money. Iran doesn't. And Iran provides huge quantities of money to Gaza, but so does Qatar. You know, you can have two enemies, not just one. The main enemy of Israel in the Middle East is Iran. But Qatar is a funder of terrorism. Qatar is a supporter of Hamas. Qatar is a supporter of Sunni extremism, Sunni Islamism, and therefore, particularly from Syria now, Qatar is very close to the new Syrian regime. It is a threat, and it needs to be dealt with as a threat. And the fact that Israel is allowing Qatar to help with the negotiations with Hamas is a disgrace. First of all, they shouldn't be negotiations, but they certainly should not be moderated by Qatar. Qatar is not a disinterested party. Qatar is clearly a Hamas ally, and it should be treated as a Hamas ally. So I don't think Israel has much choice, because the U.S. thinks Qatar is an ally, or behaves as if Qatar is an ally, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. And add to that Qatar is the number one supporter of American universities. It provides more funds to American universities than any other institution out there. And that support is unbelievably corrupting of American universities, because Qatar is dedicated to an Islamist ideology. Now, that doesn't make it the number one threat in the Middle East. It's a tiny little country. It has money, but it has nothing else. The number one threat in the Middle East is Iran. It's the ideological home of Islamism, and it actually has missiles and an army and the potential for nuclear weapons. It doesn't mean we should ignore Qatar. You can have more than one enemy. You can have more than one threat. You can have more than one country that presents a threat to you. Demon, you see the video Trump posted, didn't make, about him trying to bring stocks down. Yeah, I saw it yesterday, I think. To fill the treasury, to get Fed to lower interest rates. Apparently, White House responded that it isn't trying to lower stocks. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they did. I mean, I'm sure that video scared them, and that Trump would retweet it. But yes, there is the theory out there that what the Trump administration would like is a recession. A recession would force the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. Lower interest rates would reduce the interest payments that the government has to make on its debt, which would reduce the deficit, which would then lead to what? To a better economy, which would then raise interest rates that would then increase payments on the debt. I mean, look, you can play games. You can pretend that all of this works. It doesn't. All this is a disaster. None of it will work. And a recession actually reduces revenue to the government. If companies don't make as much money, then they pay less taxes. If individuals lose their jobs, they don't pay taxes. If they actually start drawing on benefits, more people go on welfare, and people's incomes go down, so they pay fewer taxes. So a recession actually reduces revenue, so it doesn't help the deficit that much, even if interest rates come down. In the meantime, you're destroying people's lives, you're causing real economic harm, you're setting America backwards. It's going to have to catch up somehow. It's just an unmitigated, from beginning to end, disaster. And, you know, there's no guarantee that interest rates will indeed go down, because it's possible that inflation picks up as interest rates go down, and then the Fed has to increase interest rates. There's one way you can solve all these problems. Cut government spending. Cut government spending a lot. And at the same time, cut regulations. That's the formula for economic growth. That's the formula for economic success. Cut government spending a lot, and cut regulations a lot. That'll do it. Enric. Trump's tariffs is class warfare against Americans of the mind for those of the muscle. But it's not. Trump's tariffs is a war against all working Americans. doesn't matter mind or muscle, right? Even the working class who works with their muscles still use their mind. And the reality is that this is an attack against every working, productive, every American working a productive job. This is a war against them. It's destructive to them. It will lower their quality of life. It will lower their standard of living. Store bust. If you had a 5-year time span to invest 100,000 Israeli shekel, would you stay away from stocks and invest in bonds, or split half bonds and the other half S&P 500? I don't give investment advice. This depends on what your other assets are, what your income is, what your job prospects are. It depends on a million different things. How old you are, a million different things. But right now in this environment, which bonds would you choose? Israeli bonds, American bonds, dollar bonds, shekel bonds? There's too many factors here that, even if I wanted to give you financial advice, and I don't, that you would have to take into account in thinking about this. But it might be a good idea to hold cash for a little while just to see how things shake out. Jennifer, there were just anti-Trump protests here, but it wasn't hands off my freedom. It was hands off my free stuff. Yes, that's the problem, that there is no pro-freedom movement in America. To the extent that the Tea Party maybe was a little bit somewhat, those Tea Parties have all reneged on those ideas and adopted statism of one form or another. So yes, what's left is keep your hands off my Medicare. I want smaller government, but keep your hands off my Medicare. Silvanos, thank you, coming in with $50. I appreciate it. Did you see Ben Shapiro came out against tariffs? Is there any hope Ben mitigates the tariff madness in the right? Yes, I saw that Ben came out against tariffs. Good for Ben. I hope he's waking up to the evil that is Trump and to how horrible Trump is. Can he mitigate the madness in the right? I doubt it. I looked at, generally, there is a significant portion of the right that is still somewhat economically literate, that understands that tariffs are wrong. I think everybody else is beyond educating. I think they're mindless Trump zombies. And I think many of Ben's audience is a mindless Trump zombie. And I think the comments he's probably getting, I haven't looked to see what comments he gets, but the comments he's probably getting is he doesn't understand the 4D chess that Trump is playing, which is the comments you get all the time. These are the comments that are popular out there. I don't know how Ben escapes that. But good for Ben for coming out against tariffs. I don't think he has enough sway on the right to improve the right in dramatic fashions, but it still is good to have some voices on the right that get it, that see it, that are not necessarily the conventional voices that get economic liberty on the right, but Ben Shapiro is all over the place, I guess. It's good to see somebody who supported Trump to some extent realize that this is really, really bad. Now, whether he's willing to say that it was a mistake to support Trump because of this, I don't think he is. But it is good to see that he's doing this, and I hope more voices come out against the tariffs. Even who else did I see? I think that a lot of people who are bewildered at best by the tariffs. But there are also a lot of people who just buy into it and rationalize it and rationalize it and rationalize it and rationalize it. Yeah, here's one, right? William Backman. Trump is playing cards. He is the guy at the blackjack table who scares the other players away so he can go one-on-one with the dealer. That's just not true. Trump is the mafioso boss who basically is flexing his muscles, willing to kill his own people in order to show how tough he is and to scare everybody else into submission. But he's acting like a pure mafia boss who is willing to sacrifice anything and anybody for his own grandeur and his own power. But it's nothing, I mean, to play blackjack, you have to think. And who is the dealer in this metaphor? Who is he up against? Trump is a thoroughly destructive force at this point. Yeah, Enric says Elon came out against tariffs. Yeah, I mean, I think Elon gets it. Elon's not an idiot. And again, you don't have to be that smart, but you need, anybody with a basic knowledge of economics knows that tariffs don't make any sense. You can rationalize them, you can pretend, you can attribute to Trump all kinds of stuff, but the reality is he's a moron. He's a thuggish moron. He's not smart. He's not able. He doesn't understand. He doesn't have any conception of the meaning and benefit and of trade. Yeah, he's a thuggish moron. He's a thug and a moron, as most mafia bosses, I think, are. Well, I mean, MH8 says, if he's such a great mafia boss, why isn't he the mafia boss? Because he's figured out, at least late in life, that the ultimate of being a mafia boss is to use these skills in politics. He has a lot more power than any mafia boss. He has the nuclear codes. Why would he be a mafia boss if he has the nuclear codes? He's got the mentality of a mafia boss. Could the nationwide turnout Saturday be less about hands-off and more about frustration with government overreach? I think it's a combination. I think a lot of different people are coming out. But the turnout wasn't that big, I don't think. I don't think it's meaningful. The country's still not pissed off enough, anywhere near enough, to have a real impact and bring about real change. It's letting Trump get away with way too much. Oh, God, my mouse is behaving weirdly. I'm not sure why. All right, I don't know what's going on here. Computer. Stop. Huh. Yeah, not sure what's going on. 1 second. The mouse is basically not working. Let's see. I think I need to close some windows. By the way, the kiss of the Hamas guy that was mentioned earlier, the guy who did the kiss actually said he was forced to do it by his captors. He had no choice. He wanted to be released. He had to do the kiss. So I don't know why you would attribute it to anything but something like that. Okay, not sure what's going on with my computer, but something's weird's happening. But we'll keep going as long as I can. As long as it's like the mouse is fighting me. Anybody know what this is about? All right. Michael says, the American people are turning on Trump. This is a very healthy sign. I hope so. I hope so. I'm just not seeing, I'm not convinced the numbers are there yet. We'll see. And if, does it go beyond the regular leftist people who would be against Trump anyway? Is it broader than that? I hope so. But it's still too early to say. Michael, we hate in others what is missing in ourselves. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. Yeah, I think why you hate is completely a function of your own psychology and your own ideas. So, yeah, I don't buy that. People haven't got enough going on. Envy is a distraction from their own growth. or lack of it. No, envy is not a distraction. Envy is I think, driven by both particular psychology and a particular set of ideas, a built-up resentment against achievement and success, against the good, and it's basically envy is an admission of one's own lack of goodness, one's own weakness, one's own failings. I don't think it's about not being busy enough. Okay, Michael, are we really going to let Trump destroy the global economy to protect his fragile ego? Yeah, it looks like the American people are exactly going to do that. Now, it could be that the courts stop it. That would be amazing if they do. But other than the courts, I don't see who's going to stop him. Congress is not. You'd think Congress should stop him. But it does not look like Congress is willing to do their job. Republicans are too cowardly to actually do it. Democrats will do it because it's a Republican, not because they believe in anything. Republicans are just too cowardly to go up against them, which is pretty horrific. Right. Neo, if you were the president of Israel, how would you proceed with handling relations with the U.S.? Well, I mean, I would proceed with caution. Look, I don't know. You'd have to really think about it. I would basically say that I am going to do what is necessary to defend the state of Israel, to do what my government. I would try to convince the Americans to go all in on Gaza. I would try to convince the Americans. I would basically lower all tariffs to zero in Israel. I think that there's nothing that could boost the Israeli economy more than creating basically a free trade island in Israel. What Brexit should have been, basically lower tariffs generally in Israel to zero would incredibly enhance the Israeli economy. I would deregulate on a massive scale. I would just focus, if I were Prime Minister of Israel, I would focus on making Israel as strong as it could be. And then go to America and say, look, we need your support. We'd like you to support us. But this is what we're going to do because this is our lives on the line. Please help us. And in particular, we need your help with Iran. And I wouldn't grovel. I wouldn't try to get these tariffs reduced. I wouldn't make that a big deal. I would just I would try to convince other countries to buy Israeli goods. But you don't want to destroy your relationship with the U.S. Israel has no replacement for that. And it needs to be able to buy weapons from the U.S. and it needs diplomatic cover that the U.S. gives it. On the other hand, it can't give up on its ultimate goals, where the life of Israeli citizens depends on achieving. All right, let's see. Yeah, sorry guys, not sure what's going on here. Yeah, let's try one more. Yeah, it's not helping. I'm not sure. Okay, esoteric dichotomy. This week I watched my portfolio sink below the principal. Below the principal I have invested. It's an awful feeling. Hopefully the courts can thwart this maniac. Yeah, I hope so too. For all of our sakes, for all of our portfolio sakes, let's hope that the courts or Congress maybe will wake up and actually stop this guy. Esoteric dichotomy. Several older folks at my work are mostly Trumpists, cheering the terrorist deportations, even though they affect our business. It's upsetting. It's so un-American. It's so horrible to see Americans behaving this way. It's sad, really, really, really sad. Somebody says check the battery with the mouse. It's not a battery, it's the built-in trackpad on my laptop. And it's built in, so it doesn't have a separate battery. Whoops. That is weird. Okay, my camera just shut down because it's too hot. That's a new one. try to turn it back on. Didn't run out of battery. It was just too hot. Go figure. All right, we're almost done, guys. And given all these technical problems, probably time, and it's getting late here anyway. Let's see. What's amazing is how many people just don't care, or actually think it's good, and so much wealth has been destroyed and too much. Yes, I agree completely. It's how many people don't care. What you need is the American people to be really, really upset and really, really pissed off. That's what you need. And that I don't see yet. It might still happen as the country potentially spirals into recession, certainly into slowing economic growth. Then we'll see what Americans are willing to do or not do. How are they going to make their voices heard? The mouse is suddenly working fine. All right, Gulag. Can you help me understand trade deficits? In your mind, why do people find them to be such an issue? What is the impact of a large trade deficit? There is no impact of a large trade deficit. I mean, the impact of a large trade deficit is a current account surplus. That is, that more investment get made in your country than people in your country make in other countries. That is, the dollars flow back. That is what happens. That's the impact of a large trade deficit. There is no negative impact. There's nothing bad. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing problematic. There's no impact. Some countries run trade surpluses, like Germany has a big trade surplus. That's not good. That's not bad. That just is. It's the way the particular economy is structured and its relationship to other economies. So you can't learn a lot from trade surpluses or trade deficits. Generally, rich countries that have gone up the value chain, that are producing more higher value goods or services, in America's case, run trade deficits because people in other countries want to invest in those countries and therefore want dollars. And one of the ways in which they get the dollars is by producing goods and selling them to Americans. And they produce a lot of goods and sell a lot of them to Americans. And then the dollars flow back into America's investments, which is part of the reason why people are willing to invest in production to sell to America. So a trade deficit is simple. I go to the grocery store, I leave my dollars and take the groceries. I've got a trade deficit with the grocery store. And as long as I'm productive, and as long as the grocery store is productive, that's a win-win situation. I am productive somewhere else, which allows me to make the money to be able to go to the grocery store and buy stuff. And the grocery store, as long as it runs a profit on that trade, it's better off. So like your relationship with the grocery store, the relationship in international trade is the same. It's healthy as long as both parties are better off from the trade. And as long as both parties are productive. If the United States just printed money and then went and bought that money, used that money to buy stuff from other countries wouldn't sell to America. Because they would say, wait a minute, you're just printing money like there's no tomorrow. And you're using that money is not worth anything. The value of the dollar would plummet. We don't want your dollars. We don't want to sell to you because the dollars are worthless. The very fact that people are willing to sell us goods means that they value the dollar, that they want dollars, that they're willing to take dollars in exchange for their goods. It's a good sign. It's a positive sign. Yeah, Publius says, which is true, America had a trade surplus during the Great Depression. Yeah, partially because of Smoot-Hawley, the tariffs from 1930, and partially because, now it's gone back again to not working. And partially because when you're in a depression, nobody wants to invest in you, and therefore they don't want your currency. Michael says, modern psychology. There we go. No. God, it worked a second ago. What did I do differently? Modern psychology seems to think the ego is there to protect you from shame and embarrassment, not to cultivate and produce pride and self-esteem. Well, but it depends what you mean by modern psychology. Like, I don't think that's cognitive behavioral therapy believes that, but it is kind of Freudian. That's very Freudian attitude. So some, modern psychology believes that. And I think these kind of views are actually less popular in psychology today than they were maybe 40, 50 years ago. Kind of these Freudian views. Robert, reciprocal tariffs make as much economic and moral sense as reciprocal slave labor, and that amount of sense is less than zero. Yes, or reciprocal shooting of the knee, as I like to say, right? It doesn't make any sense. Nothing about this makes sense. Michael, looks like Musk had a meltdown with Trump over these tariffs. I hope that's right. That would be good. I'll have to check that out. I haven't seen that. Again, I've been with family the last few days, haven't really been following the news like I really usually do when I do these news shows. We'll get back to that routine once I get back home soon, very soon. MH08, thank you. Ayal R, thank you. Appreciate the sticker. You can still support the show, by the way, guys, with stickers. We've got 2 last questions, so if you're going to do it soon. All right, what's going on? This is so weird. I don't think I've ever had this happen to me on my laptop. All right, Michael says, I'm listening to Ronald Reagan's old speeches on tariffs and free trade. He was spot on. How far we have fallen. Yes, I mean, Reagan was amazing in a lot of his speeches. He gave really good speeches. It's his actions that weren't always that good. I mean, the reality is that Reagan imposed tariffs. Reagan imposed, voluntary quotas on Japanese cars. He didn't live up to his free trade rhetoric any more than he lived up to any of his other free market rhetoric, which is sad. But yes, we have come a long way from Reagan to Trump. How low has the Republican Party sunk? It really is hard to believe. It's not the same political party anymore. It's a completely different political party. All right, Jack, thank you, Yaron. I appreciate the knowledge I gained from you, not just from here, but your books also. Thank you, Jack. Really appreciate that. And Jacob says, Elon came out urging free trade, free movement of talent, immigration between the US and Europe. Trump, Elon bromance has a few months left to live. I saw rumors that Elon Musk was leaving Doge. Who knows? That could happen any day now. So yeah, it looks like, as I predicted, it won't last a year. I think Musk is on the way out. All right, everybody. Thank you. I think that technical stuff is all a hint that it's time to go. I will see you on Wednesday. I don't know what to tell you about what to do about the Yaron Brook withdrawal syndrome, but hopefully you can survive until Wednesday. Let's make Wednesday a great Super Chat day. Don't forget to become a supporter on Patreon. I will see you on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your weekend and your week.